Hello everybody, Michael here for Tactica Imperialis with a new series of 40k Codex Analysis. Today we'll be taking a look at a 6th edition Codex, Codex Tyranids. Now, I have an admission to make. I've never played Tyranids, either as Tyranids or against them. I've watched them be played several times in battle reports, and I know a bit about them. I know Idic Beer is running a series right now called Tyranid Learning Curve. So if you don't find my explanation satisfactory, you can always go and check out his channel. I will put a link to his first episode in the description, and you can go and subscribe to him if you haven't done so already, which you should have done, really. So, what do I make of the Tyranids? Let's have my first impressions on the Codex before we jump right in. Well, it's a Codex of synergy. Synergy between the Synapse creatures and everything else. Because without Synapse creatures, your army basically falls apart. You'll see why in this episode when we go over the instinctive behavior tables, but it is really, really bad if you don't have Synapse creatures, and that means running a gimmicky list at the expense of some Synapse can really screw you up. So that's my first thoughts. As far as the units go, they're alright. I don't think it's the best Codex out there, but there are some very exploitable combos, which you've probably seen all over the internet. And for a while, Tyranids were the ally of choice just because flying Hive Tyrants were and probably still are a bit ridiculous. Anyway, with that said, let's get on with episode 1, which will be special rules, relics, warlord traits, and the psychic discipline. And I've lost my page. I'm hoping not to have too many page-based issues because I actually have the book in front of me rather than having to scroll around an ebook. So, anyway, with that said, let's get on with the show, shall we? So, there are 3 primary special rules that apply across many Tyranid units. The first one is Shadow in the Warp. All enemy units and models with a Psyker, Psychic Pilot, or Brotherhood of Psykers special rule have a -3 leadership penalty whilst within 12 inches of one or more models with Shadow in the Warp. This used to be amazing, but it's not as good now. Back when this codex was written in 6th edition, Psychic tests were still done based on leadership. Now they're not. They are done based on the casting system that I talked about before in previous 40k tactics. But where this comes in useful is if they perils of the warp for whatever reason. Because suddenly, instead of being leadership 9 or 10 as many psykers are, they're now leadership 6 and 7 respectively. And low leadership psykers like Orc Weird Boys are suddenly leadership 4 or leadership 5. And that's horrifying, meaning that you are very likely to take the worst side of the result. Or, for example, if you roll a 6, you take the damage instead of taking the buff. If you roll a 1, you die instead of just taking a wound from the backlash. And all the other things in between. So Shadow in the Warp is more situational than it used to be, but it's still kind of good. Synapse creature, I suppose I should probably mention this first. All models with Synapse creature have a Synapse range of 12 inches unless stated. That's a 12-inch bubble around them. Friendly models from Codex Tyranids within this Synapse range, including the Synapse creatures themselves, are fearless. Just fearless, so you never have to worry about morale checks, pinning checks, or anything ever again. If a unit from Codex Tyranids is falling back and at least one of the unit's models is within a friendly Synapse creature's range before the unit moves, it automatically regroups. So let's say you are out of Synapse range and you break from melee and you run for it, and then you land in Synapse range on your next turn, you immediately regroup without having to take a regroup check, which in the case of Gaunts is on a ridiculously tiny leadership. I think it's 5. So it's useful in that way, but the main reason it's useful is because of instinctive behavior. So this special rule is always followed in brackets by a type. There are 3 types: lurk, hunt, and feed, which corresponds to a table opposite, which I'm going to go over in a moment. At the beginning of each of your turns, all units from Codex Tyranids outside of the range of friendly Synapse creatures, so more than 12 inches away from every Synapse creature on the board, must take a leadership test unless they are engaged in melee, falling back, gone to ground, or arrived from reserve this turn. So if you'd gone to ground during your previous turn, you don't have to take an instinctive behavior. If you are running away or stuck in melee, you don't have to worry about instinctive behavior, which in the case of instinctive behavior feed could have been horribly brutal. But you don't have to worry about that. But you must take a leadership test. This applies whether you're fearless or not, because there is a result in hunt based on being fearless. So if you are outside of Synapse range, even if you are fearless for some reason, I don't believe there are any non-fearless Any fearless non-synapse creatures I'd have to check as I go through the review, but you still have to take this test. If you pass, you're fine. The unit acts normally. But if you fail, roll a d6 on the appropriate table depending on their type of instinctive behavior. The effects of the result rolled last until the beginning of your next turn unless otherwise specified. So, if you are a unit with instinctive behavior lurk and you fail your leadership test, you roll on the lurk table. On a 1 to 3, the unit is treated as having failed a morale check and must immediately fall back, which is horrible. And it means that you cannot just leave a unit of lurkers behind as objective campers because half the time they're just going to run away. The other half of the time they're actually really good at objective camping because on a 4 to 5 you get seek cover. In the movement phase the unit is not slowed by difficult terrain, you just move 6 through it, although you must take dangerous terrain tests as normal. In the shooting phase the unit can run, but it can only shoot if it's in a building or area terrain. If the unit is partially within the terrain, only those within the terrain are allowed to shoot, and it cannot charge in the assault phase. So basically your movement phase, if you get seek cover, is find cover. Kind of self-explanatory. Get into cover, otherwise you can't shoot. You can run, but you can't shoot. This means that if there is objective camping to be done, you want to be personally set your objectives up as near to a terrain piece as you can, like a forest, so you can just move into it if you get seek cover, leave a couple guys sticking out, and then most of you guys can still shoot. And of course, if you are a charger, there are not many lurkers that you'd want to be going into melee. In fact, I can't think of one off the top of my head. I'm just going to have a flick through and see if there's anything that comes immediately to mind. Lictors, for example, have lurk. You might want them to charge. Or you might want Venomthropes, no. Now, there's nothing else with lurk, really. There's not much lurker in here, but if you have an assaulter like Lictors, you may want them to assault, but you can't because of this. If you get a 6, you follow all the rules for seek cover, as I've already mentioned, but you gain stealth, meaning you have a 6-up cover save in the open, and a 4+ cover save if you're in normal cover save sort of range. So if there's a unit in the way, 4-up cover. If you're in behind an Aegis defense line, 4-up cover. If you go ground behind it, 2-up cover. Standard sort of practice, really. It can be really, really kind of good. Right, instinctive behavior hunt. This is the newest one. Lurk and feeder in the old codex, hunt is new. On a 1 to 3, you get burrow and hide. The unit immediately goes to ground, meaning that it cannot move, and it's shooting snapshots, which is horrible in most cases. Units that contain at least small model with fearless, this is why even fearless models have to take the test, treat this result as prowl instead. Now prowl is the 4 to 5 result, and it basically means that in the shooting phase you can't run. So if you're out of position or need to make a last gasp dash for an objective, you can't. But you must instead shoot at the closest enemy unit within range and line of sight of at least one model, not majority, just one. So if there's one guy sat round a corner that one guy can see who's 6 inches away, and there's another big duty target 12 inches away, tough, that one guy's going to have to shoot at that one guy. Sorry, that's why this is bad. If there is no viable target, you can do nothing in the shooting phase because you can't run. And it cannot also charge in the assault phase. Again, there are not many hunters that you probably want to be charging. I would again just have a look to see if there's any that come immediately to mind with hunt. Something like gargoyles perhaps might be wanting to charge in some cases. I don't know, or are they fast attack now? Hive Guard, if you want to just smack them in as a wall, nope. Lictors have lurk. They've got feed. Harpies are flyers. Gargoyles, for example, you might want to charge in or run with them. Yeah, not good. Or Tyranids, they have hunt. You want to smash them into something because they can just be really, really sticky? Nope, not going to happen. Bear that in mind. Destroy, number 6, if you roll a 6, that is. Follows all the rules for prowl, as I've already mentioned, so can't run, must shoot at the nearest thing, regardless of what it is, can't charge. And you also gain preferred enemy. So you reroll all 1s to hit and to wound with your shooting, which actually means you could actually get buffed off the instinctive behavior, but it's very situational, as in your nearest target is the target you'd be targeting, and you weren't planning to run or charge. So it could be a minor buff, but generally it sucks. Finally, Instinctive Behavior Feed. Possibly the best and the worst table. On a 1 to 3, you get Cannibalistic Hunger. Your unit eats itself. Literally. So the unit immediately suffers a number of hits equal to the number of models in that unit. So 10-man squad, 10 hits, 30-man squad, 30 hits. Equal using the unit's majority strength. If there's a tie for a number of models with the majority of models strength, use the highest. So 15 strength 3s and 15 strength 4s, you use strength 4 and AP nothing. Wounds are allocated by you, so you don't have to stick them on the front guy or something, or you don't have to stick them on a character because of the way the wounds work. You can just stick them on random dudes. And armor saves but not cover saves may be taken. After resolving casualties, if there are any that is, the unit can do nothing else until the end of its turn. I don't believe... It says resolving casualties, so I think you can actually fail another morale check on this and actually then run off. Though that would be kind of weird. So a unit is out of range, its instincts take over, they eat themselves, get scared and run off. Really? I'd have to check on that one. But regardless of what happens with casualty, you can't do anything else the rest of the turn. So you can't charge, you can't move, you can't shoot, you can't run, you're buggered. And there are a lot of feeder units that you want to be smashing into melee. Hormagaunts are the classic example, but a lot of the monstrous creatures have feed. For example, the Haruspex has feed, the Carnifexes have feed. It just could be crippling to you. If you're a single model unit, i.e., let's say a Haruspex, then you treat this as Devour, which is the 4 to 5 result. In the shooting phase, you can't shoot and run. So if you had something like, I don't know, a short-ranged Thorax flamer weapon, before you want to hit melee, nope. Want to run for an objective? Nope. In assault phase, if you can declare a charge, you have to. Even if you don't want to, you have to against the nearest viable enemy unit. So if there's one that's like 9 inches behind you, and there's one that's 6 inches in front of you that you don't really want to go after, maybe it's a beat stick unit, maybe it's a really sticky unit, got to charge it anyway. And if you are out of charge range, you can't do anything else. Now, this doesn't matter as such because you wouldn't be doing anything anyway, but if there were like jetpack units in here, I don't believe there are, you can't do anything. On a 6, you get kill. Follows all the rules for Devour, so can't shoot and run, must charge the nearest unit if it can. And it also gains rage when it gets an extra attack on the charge, which is alright. I mean, it's not great, but if you were charging anyway and had no shooting weapons, it's not so bad, I suppose. So those tables suck. Quite frankly, they are awful. Don't be wanting to be roll on them. So don't. Stay in Synapse range. Get a lot of Synapse creatures and protect them. I'll try and do a little bit of a Tactica at the end of this series, or I'll do one with Rowan. But basically the rule of thumb is lots of Synapse to cover for instinctive behavior, and then cover those Synapse creatures to make sure they don't die. Excuse me. Warlord traits. Now there is of course a Tyranid table. You don't have to roll on it. You can roll on the Warlord table from tables from the rulebook. There are 2 awful ones, 2 situational ones, and 2 good ones. 2 frankly amazing ones. So the first Warlord trait is Nature's Bane. This one sucks. At the beginning of each of your movement phase, typo, you may select one forest, jungle, or wood terrain piece within 12 inches of your Warlord, like a forest. That terrain piece becomes a carnivorous jungle. See the Mysterious Forest table in the 40k rulebook, and stays like that for the rest of the game, even if it was a different type of Mysterious Forest beforehand. See why this sucks? It's so situational. You're never going to use it unless you're on a dense, populated, foresty board. And if it is early on, that's still not good, because you have to then basically waste your Warlord trait until you get up close and personal. Flying High Tyrants could make good use of this. Everybody else use foot slogging? Nah, bad. Generally though, I would re-roll this one every time if I'm playing Battleforged. Number 2, Heightened Senses. The Warlord and all friendly models from Codex Tyranids within 12 inches of said Warlord have night vision. This means you should always push for night fighting on turn 1. Generally your guns are shorter range than your enemies, so you'll be wanting that stealth on turn 1. Plus with night vision, anything that does get into range, still useful. So Flying High Tyrants with Twin Link Devourers and night vision, yes please. 3, Synaptic Linchpin. This is amazing. Your Warlord Synapse range is 18 inches. Now, this doesn't sound like a big buff, it's just 6 inches extra, but that's a 12-inch greater diameter on your bubble, because it's 6 inches either side. That's a huge, huge buff. You need to understand how big a buff that is. to your models when you have a bigger Synapse range. And it just means that you don't need as many Synapse creatures in a certain range because you have a greater overlap of Synapse creatures. Number 4, Mind Eater, the other situational one after Heightened Senses. Your army gains 2 victory points for each enemy character or each enemy model with independent character slain by your warlord in a challenge. If you sweeping advance this independent character, no victory points. So when you think about your warlord, you may want to make him into a combat beat stick just for this reason. If you are a flying Hive Tyrant or maybe a Turvigon who does not want to be getting stuck in, then re-roll this one every time because it's just too situational. But 2 victory points for killing in a challenge is a huge amount of points. Like you're playing Purge the Alien, that's like 3 kill points. If you're playing a game of standard missions where there's only so many objectives on the board, you can actually win the game without claiming any objectives just by doing this. There are only going to be so many independent characters about, so like the 2 HQs and a few upgrade characters like priests or mech boys, but it's still really good nonetheless. But generally, unless you're a combat beat stick who is expecting to get to melee anyway, I'd be re-rolling this. 5, Digested Denial, another one that kind of sucks. After deployment, but before scout redeployments and infiltrators deploy, nominate 1 piece of terrain in the enemy deployment zone. But it may not be one your opponent has purchased as part of their army. So if they bought an Aegis defense line, you can't do this to the Aegis defense line. The terrain piece's cover save is reduced by 1 for the duration of the game to a minimum of 6 up, and it can only be affected once. So again, really, really situational. On a terrain dense board, it might be useful to knock a pre-set up walls defense setup from 5 up to 6 up, or something like that. But generally, it just sucks. Reroll most of the time. Finally, number 6, Adaptive Biology. If the Warlord suffers 1 or more unsaved wounds, it gains Feel No Pain 5 up at the beginning of its next movement phase for the rest of the game. This is great unless you're about to die. So the reason this is great is because it's a Feel No Pain 5 up. On a Hive Tyrant or a Turvigon, this is ridiculous. But it says at the beginning of its next movement phase. This means if you take a wound from shooting and then take another wound, then you don't get the Feel No Pain against the second wound because your Feel No Pain hasn't kicked in yet. Which means that if an opponent knows what they're doing, they can strip you of all but 1 or 2 wounds in 1 turn before the Feel No Pain kicks in, and then the Feel No Pain is a lot worse. It's still good, but it's worse than it could be. Regardless, this is one of the best ones in the book, and I would never re-roll it because the only good traits are Synaptic Linchpin and Adaptive Biology. Mind Eater is situational as is Heightened Senses, and the other 2 just suck. So, if you're going to roll and you get 3 and 6, keep them at all costs. Right, moving on to something. I was just going to go and find, there we go, found them. Relics and the Psychic Discipline. So there are 5 Bio-Artefacts, and they are really expensive. Now, Tyranids have a different upgrade system to many armies in that they often upgrade pairs of Scything Talons. There's a designer's note that I'll go over in a bit in another episode. So any model may replace any pair of Scything Talons with one of the following. So the designer's note regarding Scything Talons is as follows from the author of the codex. I can't remember who actually wrote this codex. Tyranid melee weapons come in pairs. For game purposes, each pair is treated as a single melee weapon. This means that Tyranid models must fight with 2 pairs to gain a bonus attack. So generally, you have to swap out in pairs. So you'll often have a pair of Scything Talons like Hormagaunts do, or Tyranid warriors do. Just bear in mind that you'll have to swap. You can't just keep 1 Scything Talon to keep getting a relic. You have to swap the whole pair. Anyway, as I was saying, relics. The Maw Claws of Thyrax are 10 points. They are ranged melee, strength user AP5, rending with assimilate. So if this weapon's cause combat attacks cause an enemy model to be removed as a casualty, the model equipped with the Maw Claws gains preferred enemy against all units chosen from the same codex as the model that died. So let's say I am a Tyranid Prime and I eat a guardsman. I now have preferred enemy guard. Great. And if it's rending and I kill a Terminator, I now have preferred enemy against Codex Space Marines or whatever Codex Marines I'm up against. It does not give you preferred enemy against the allies unless you also start killing some allies. and it's only AP 5, so it's kind of bad in that regard. On a monstrous creature, it's great because it's AP 2 all the time, and you'll just preferred enemy instantly. But you've got rending to give you that anyway, so it's better on characters like Tyranid Primes, who possibly need a way to get some AP and maybe get a buff to their melee attacks, because they're not always wounding on 2s. And then you have the Miasma Cannon for 25 points. It's a shooting weapon with 2 profiles. 36 inch range, strength 1, AP 4, assault 1 blast, poison 2 up. Okay, it's alright. It's nothing ridiculously out there, but it's alright. Or Miasmic Spray, template, 1, 4, assault 1, poison 2 up. So it's the same profile, but it's a flamer instead of a blast weapon. And that's still good. So if you're just about to hit melee, that's really useful. If you are a flying monster creature who's just doing a fly past, Miasmic Spray could be really useful. Best used on non-melee type of guys, so Tervigons, Flying Hive Tyrants, and the like. The Norn Crown, 40 points. This does not replace a pair of Siling Talons. This is just an upgrade, but it's 40 points. That's huge. But what it does is also huge. It's plus 6 inches to your synapse range, meaning that if you have Synaptic Linchpin and this, you have a 24-inch synapse. If you just have this, your synapse is 18. That's great because it basically gives you 2 dudes with a Synaptic Linchpin Warlord trait all the time, assuming one of them has Synaptic Linchpin. Or even if you roll badly, you can still have it by having the Norn Crown. It is expensive, but it is so useful because of the danger posed by instinctive behavior that I think it's worth it. The Imgal Factor also does not replace the Siling Talons, so it could be taken in addition to any other weapon and upgrade for 40 points again. Now this one I don't think is as valuable because it's based on melee. At the start of every assault phase, a model with the Imgal Factor must alter into one of the 3 forms listed below. The bonus gained lasts until the end of the phase, so it just lasts for that assault phase. The same form cannot be chosen consecutively, so if you charge in and you choose one buff, you can't then pick the same buff when your opponent's turn rolls around. You have to wait for your turn to roll back around before you can choose that buff again. So, the first buff is Slashing Claws for plus 1 strength, Tentacled Limbs, plus 1 attack, or Protective Carapace, plus 1 armor save. Now, the best one here is armor save, because it gives you dudes a 2-up save all the time. But you then have to get rid of it to swap it. Then I think the best one is Slashing Claws if you are not a monstrous creature with strength 6. If you are a monstrous creature with strength 6, you're probably better with more attacks, unless you are trying to kill vehicles, in which case plus 1 strength is still good. Is it worth 40 points? No, I think it's worth about 25 or 30. But it could be ridiculous, so I think it's got to stay quite expensive. Finally, the Reaper of Obliterax. Who calls a world Obliterax? I have to ask. Anyway, it's 45 points, which is ridiculous. And it is a melee weapon that is plus 1 strength and AP 3. So on Tyranid Primes, they become strength 6. Hive Tyrants become strength 7, but they're AP 2 anyway, so it's not as good. It's a melee weapon with Shred, so it rerolls to wound all the time, which is great. Has Life Drain, which means that on a 6 to wound, it causes instant death. And Swift Strike for plus 3 initiative. This means that a Tyranid Prime is initiative 8. A Hive Tyrant is initiative 8. Even a Tervigon is initiative 5. And I think that's not designed for melee, but it can be initiative 5. So it's scary, but it's ridiculously overpriced, I think. I mean, Life Drain is okay. Okay, it's good. I'm not going to deny that it's good. But 45 points for a glorified power weapon? Really? Nah, sorry, nope. I don't think it's worth 45. 30, 35, I'd understand. 45, no. No. But it's still ridiculously good if you can get it into the right dude in the right place at the right time. Finally, for this episode, we have the powers of the Hive Mind. Now, all Psychers use this discipline. You have no option. You can't use Demonology. It didn't exist at the time and it was never allocated to them. And you cannot use Biomancy, Pyromancy, Telekinesis, Telepathy, or Divination. You are not allowed because it was OP back when they were allowed it. So, Power 1, Primaris Power. Dominion. Warp Charge 1 Blessing that targets the Psyker himself. Plus 6 inches to Synapse range. So good. Great power. So glad it's a Primaris. Always cast it because it's just good. It's one of those powers that you can use as a great feint if you don't rely on extra Synapse range to bait out power dice because your opponent then knows you can just spread out at will. Number 1, Catalyst, Warp Charge 1. Blessing that targets the Psyker's unit and up to one other friendly Tyranid unit within 12 inches. So your unit gets buffed, and then you pick another unit within 12 inches to also get buffed, with Feel No Pain. So if you are a Hive Tyrant with Tyrant Guard, you can cast this power, give your whole squad Feel No Pain, and then let's say give the Gaunt Shield that's in front of you Feel No Pain as well. And that's ridiculously good for Warp Charge 1. It's not broken per se because instant death is a thing, but on monstrous creatures it's unbelievably good. So imagine a Hive Tyrant gives himself and then the Carnifex Brood Feel No Pain. Ouch, that's good. Number 2, the Horror, also Warp Charge 1. In fact, there's only one Warp Charge 2 power in the whole set. It's a malediction targeting a single enemy unit within 24. The unit must take a pinning check with a -2 modifier to leadership. If you've got a squad that you're really scared of shooting at you, maybe it's packing a lot of pie plates, this is a great way to lock it down, or at least force your opponent to use all their deny dice on locking it down. Number 3, Onslaught, also Warp Charge 1. It's a blessing that targets a single friendly unit within 24. While it's in effect, it can run and then shoot in its shooting phase. Get that order right. It says run and then shoot. So if you're a Termagaunt squad and who wants to run back to an objective before shooting, you might not be able to shoot as well if you're falling out of range. If you're trying to get closer, it's great. If you're trying to back off, it's worse. 4, Paroxysm. It's a malediction on a single enemy unit within 24, like the Horror. Whilst this power is in effect, the target unit's weapon skill and ballistic skill are reduced by D3. Roll once and apply to both characteristics. So between BS1 and BS3 Space Marines. Now imagine Space Marines at BS2. Yeah. Or Guardsmen at BS1. Or, I don't know, Eldar at BS1. Tau at BS1. It's just great. Or Orcs at weapon skill 1. I mean, they don't care about the BS debuff, but weapon skill could be damaging as well. Really good. And you only roll once, bear that in mind. Right. Psychic Scream, Warp Charge 1, Nova. So this is basically you pick a point, you take your Psyker and you do a bubble around him. It's a 6-inch bubble in this case, so it's a 12-inch diameter. For each target unit, roll 2d6 and subtract leadership. That unit suffers a number of wounds equal to the result. Armor and cover saves cannot be taken. So it's generally going to be 9 minus leadership because the average 2d6 roll is 7, add 2 is 9. So it's 9 minus leadership wounds, generally. It could be up to 14 minus leadership wounds. This is really good against low leadership, high armor save units. So Orc Mega Knobs are a classic example, but it's also useful against things like Space Marine Terminators just to get through the armor save if you don't have a monstrous creature about that you want to get into melee or any AP2 weapons sitting around. It's good like that. Not the best power though. Finally, number 6, Warp Blast, the Warp Charge 2 power. It's a Witchfire, the only one in the discipline, and has 2 fire modes. In Burst mode, it is Strength 5 AP3, 24-inch range, Assault 1, Blast. And in Lance mode is 18-inch range, Strength 10 AP2, Assault 1, Lance. Which can do a ridiculous amount of damage, because it treats all vehicles' armor value as 12, meaning you're penning on 3s all the time. When you're manifesting the power, you must choose which profile you're using before you choose target. This was written when you couldn't pre-measure range, so this isn't a problem anymore, but you have to pick before you fire. That's worth noting. Right, that's the end of this episode. It's gone on quite a long time, I'm conscious of that, but in review of the section, instinctive behavior is awful and you need lots of sign-ups to get around it. Shadow in the Warp is situational. Speaking of Psychic, the discipline is good. It's not broken, but it's good. The relics are, again, pretty decent, but some of them are a bit ridiculously expensive. The Warlord traits on the whole suck, but there are 2 absolutely amazing ones and 1 or 2 pretty situationally good ones. So with that said, that is the end of this episode. If you have enjoyed it, make sure to leave it a like rating and subscribe if you have not. Thank you for watching this episode. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and I will see you all again.